Tracy here from Steel Streams, and I'm here with Joa.
Howdy.
And we went and saw Warcraft about a week ago, and are now getting around to doing our movie review of it. This is the first in a series of movie reviews that we're planning on doing that we are really excited about. We always talk about movies all the time and decided that we wanted to share our insight and input with you guys, all of you lovely people out there in the internet world. As you can see, Joa is sporting his Ashbringer that he got at MegaCon very happily. It's a bit heavy. You need to level up so that you can carry it,
Okay.
so that you can wield it. Must be level 100.
Yep.
And Joa's got a list of things that we're going to go over if you want to start it off.
Yeah, we're first topic we're gonna cover is casting choices. And I have to say, overall, amazing cast. I don't think there was anybody I disagreed with or felt that didn't fit. Granted, half the cast was performing just voiceovers for CGI or motion capture. We're starting off, of course, starring Travis
Fimmel.
Fimmel, it's pronounced, and a lot of you might know him from Vikings, which I absolutely adore. Awesome show.
Yes.
And definitely some parts where his portrayal of the character Ragnar carries over in his portrayal of Anduin Lothar.
But they were still very unique characters.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they definitely had entirely different motivations. Lothar was very much, a king and country man and everything. He did have, a strong importance on this friendship between King Lane and Medivh, and that was really neat to see. But whereas Ragnar is more so his personal pride. But I mean, overall, absolutely brilliant performance. One part that particularly caught me though as being very similar is there's a scene where Lothar is he had just, spoiler alert by the way.
Yes. Spoilers.
He had just lost his son, Kalen, who was pronounced.
Yes.
And he was drinking away his sorrows in, I want to say, the Lion's Pride Inn.
Probably. You could tell by a lot of the spaces that they were in just by the architecture alone. If you ever spend any time in any of the inns or even in the castle, in the courtroom, and everything was to the T, which well done on the set design.
Yeah, and he was laying on his back on the counter, and when Garona walks in, Garona Half-Orc, he saunters and slides himself off the counter and kind of gives this little shuffling movement while holding the mug perfectly still, and it was just a very Ragnar moment. But absolutely great portrayal from him. Paula Patton actually was Garona Half-Orc, wonderful actress. Did a great job as far as the voice and everything. Great portrayal of the character. Going over my notes again, we have Toby Keeble.
As Duratan.
Probably mispronouncing that, and I apologize, Toby. But wonderful portrayal as Duratan. Very, very much fits the book and the canon. Wonderful job by him. Of course, Ben Foster as Medivh. Great choice in my opinion. I actually loved his portrayal.
I think he was a great actor. The only thing that bothered me about Medivh is that Medivh didn't have black hair. In every single portrayal I've seen of Medivh, he has black hair. Even in Heroes of the Storm, he has black hair. So the fact that Ben Foster did not, it was just that one little detail that I saw that bothered me.
Yeah, and Dominic Cooper as King Lane did a good job there and everything. I mean, like I said, no complaints really throughout the series. It was very wonderful done. I do want to take a moment to throw a shout out to, I believe it was, just a moment. I actually don't have her name on here. She's not one of the top listed cast members. And that was the actress that played Duratan's wife, whose name all of a sudden escapes me.
Oh God.
She's not even on there.
She's not on there.
That is a travesty. Well, Google is absolutely disappointing, actually. Their initial cast list of their cast bar doesn't even show her listed, and that's a shame. IMDb, however, most likely does. Oh goodness, this color scheme is awful to read through. Draka, yes. I don't know how I forgot that.
Anna Galvin.
Yeah, wonderful job by her. I feel like that character, for having such a small role in the book, Rise of the Horde and everything, absolutely amazing portrayal. I mean, went down like a total badass, if you will, and absolutely loved her acting.
Yeah, and I have to say, kudos to the writers and the people that decided about the story and what kind of characters were going to be involved. Um, so Warcraft is mostly the first war, the initial invasion of Azeroth by the orcs. And if you follow the lore, there isn't really a lot of female characters initially. It's not until you start to get to Warcraft 3 where you get characters like Sylvanas, Jaina, when you really started to see these well-rounded female characters. A lot of these other characters like Draka, Garona, they are of the time period, but they exist in books and they exist in comics. And the fact that the people that made the movie were writers, Duncan Jones was the director, I believe. They brought these female characters to life. Even Lady Taria, King Lane's wife, she doesn't even exist in regular canon, right?
She had existed. I'm not even sure if they ever said her name, but yeah, it was only in the movie really that they fleshed out her backstory.
But I think that was so great and so good of them, and to show these women as powerful, as influential, and characters that were really well respected by the men around them. So kudos to you guys.
Yeah, I gotta say, probably the only other major character we're really missing out on was, or we had forgot to mention rather, was Khadgar. And in this movie, it's probably one of my other subtler complaints is a lot of you who play World of Warcraft may know Khadgar as the elderly Gandalf-like mage.
Mm-hmm.
Not so in this movie. He doesn't have the great hair. He's not old looking. He's not, really they kind of skipped over that whole portion. He starts off as the young mage, a failed apprentice of the Currentor, and eventually the trainee under Medivh for the position of the next Guardian. All that was pretty accurate, pretty true. The only thing, like I said, I didn't agree with is during the penultimate fight of the film, there's a part in the initial canon where Khadgar gets drained of his youth by Medivh, and he comes across as older, and he pretty much drains the life out of him. And they had skipped over that. I can totally understand, because then you have to deal with prosthetics and makeup and CGI effects and everything in future films. So I can understand them wanting to bypass it for that reason, but it was kind of just one of the few things that was actually lacking as far as staying true to the original story.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to agree with you there. The moment they introduced Khadgar, the moment he said his name, I was like, they're going to show it. They're going to show when he gets all the life drained out of him. And I was so excited for that scene, because I think Khadgar is just a really fascinating character. And I'm really happy that in Warlords of Draenor, we got to see a lot of his character. He became the mage of that game. Beforehand it was Jaina and everybody like that. But he became the man in that game, and I was so looking forward to that, and I didn't get it. But ultimately, I loved seeing young Khadgar. I loved seeing him make mistakes, and I loved seeing the way he interacted with Medivh, because, you could say that, since Medivh was being possessed by Sargeras, he's obviously paranoid, he thinks he's going to be found out, but the way that he reacted around Khadgar, he knew that he was a powerful mage. He knew he had potential, and he saw him as a threat. And to see Khadgar, somebody so young, already making the Guardian uncomfortable, they're setting him up to be one of the most powerful characters in future movies if they continue on with the series, which, thank goodness for an amazing opening in China, because I'm hoping that just with that alone, they'll be like, yes, Warcraft 2.
Yeah. Overall, though, what would you say is your favorite character?
I'm liking what they're doing with Garona. It could be me. I don't know. I tend to favor female characters. It's always just been something about me. I don't know. I'm a girl. I like girls. I don't know. But I really like that they're starting to set her up as a very complicated character. She's spoiler alert. They're kind of setting her up to be the leader of the Horde now, with the killing of King Lane. But she killed King Lane because King Lane told her to. They have a complicated, not really a complicated relationship. He told her to do it so that she could turn the Horde around, because she spent time with the humans and she learned from them. And so that changes her storyline. Before she killed King Lane, because she was being brainwashed or possessed. Mind controlled, yeah. Now it's more of he told her to do it. And so she killed someone she very much respects. She's now the right up with next to Gul'dan as far as influence, so she's going to have to be battling with Gul'dan. And there was a budding romance with Lothar, and Lothar thinks that she's now killed the king and betrayed him. So they're setting it up for that to be an explosion and to be an issue. And now she's got to deal with, how does she go from being a slave to being a leader? I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with her.
Yeah, I totally agree. There was a slight change. Initially in the original canon, Garona, I believe, was the lover of Medivh.
Yeah.
Not Lothar. And in the film, they, I guess, had kind of changed it around to where Medivh, I believe it was implied, was her father? Somehow? Because he had spoken about that, being in love with another woman, and because of his connection to the world of Draenor, as far as I understood it, it was more so like a father-daughter relationship, because it was implied that in the initial canon, Garona Half-Orcan was half-orc, half-Draenei. Because of the Draenei's more or less exclusion from the film, minus a small cameo in the very beginning there, I think a lot of folks were implying that Medivh had came to Draenor, and that romance had happened there, and that was the initial origination of Garona. My favorite character, however, I have one, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say Medivh.
Yeah.
I actually, even despite the hair difference, I was a big fan of Medivh. It was a great historic character in the series, and I think they really did him justice. I like the way that they showed how he was powerful. He had influence both politically, and beyond that, as far as he was good friends with Lothar, and he could convince him, and they worked together great. King Lane respected him very highly. Khadgar feared him to an extent. It was really a great portraying all of his different aspects, the duality of, himself as he's fighting this nagging notion that he's doing something wrong, and he suspects it, but he's afraid of finding out the truth of it. Mm-hmm. And that was a really great way of playing out the character.
Mm-hmm. And even his addiction to magic, that was an interesting addition to his character.
Well, yeah, I think it was to show that everything he did was draining mana, essentially, trying to fight back and keep Sargeras from resurfacing. And so when he reached his lowest point, that's when Sargeras had pretty much broken out and taken over control of him. And like I said, that was all done very well. And he had a fitting end. It wasn't quite the end of the books in the original series. He got decapitated by Lothar and stabbed by Khadgar.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a PG-13 movie. I totally understand wanting to kind of calm that down a little bit. Can't be so intense. So I didn't have too many complaints there. Moving along, we have effects. And I have to say, this is one of the most beautiful films I have seen to date. Revolutionary. I mean, I consider it right up there with Avatar. Not quite in the same way as Avatar. Avatar is very focused on realism, and yet this film...
Not the M. Night Avatar.
No.
You're talking about James Cameron.
James Cameron.
Okay.
Yes. Not the travesty that was The Last Airbender.
I was gonna say.
We don't talk about that movie. That never existed.
M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong?
Yes.
God, that joke is so old.
Anywho, like I said, we try and forget that film ever existed. It was absolute travesty. Watch the original cartoon series. It's great.
Legend of Korra, too.
Yeah, Legend of Korra is great sequel. Terrible what they did to it. But the way they combined the stylized aesthetic of Warcraft, it's always been kind of cartoony, a little bit, outrageous proportions, giant shoulder pauldrons. This thing, I mean, this is pretty unwieldy. I don't know if I would use this to actually hack a man apart. I could. But, probably not the most practical thing ever.
It's about half your height, too.
Oh yeah, it's heavy. This is like 70 pounds.
We're short people.
We are hobbits. But, moving along. The way they combine the aesthetic and everything, the props were amazing. if you watch any of the behind the scenes footage, there's green screen. You know, a lot of the cityscapes and everything are added in post production, but the amount of practical stuff they did. I mean, they showed these weapon rooms, and each weapon was individually crafted, and a lot of them were they had various ones. They had steel, you know, they had rubber, they had plastic, depending on what it was used for in the shot. And I mean, just rooms, armories full of props, and it was just absolutely amazing. They had an entire warehouse of costumes.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. They had, you know, an entire rack just for commoners in Stormwind, and then they had, you know, the nobility rack for people who were dressed as nobles in Stormwind, and it was really neat the amount of work that went into that. Folks over in China, actually, several Chinese malls got to go see several of the orcish tents and the Stormwind throne and everything that they had set up for a promotional event. And I mean, just seeing pictures of it, even, it's absolutely amazing the scale of it. Because you have to remember, this is a world where everything is larger than life. You know, castles are immensely vaulted roofs that, in reality, would be completely unfeasible. And so when they're sculpting, you know, a pillar, let's say, it would have to be outrageously proportioned to give everything this larger than life feeling without it dwarfing the actors themselves and making it come across as silly or unfitting or out of place.
Yeah, they ended up using a lot of the illusionary tactics that Disney World uses, where the base is bigger, and then once you get to the top, it starts to get smaller. It's you can see it in like Cinderella's castle, or if you ever go to Disney World or Disneyland, depending on where you are. You can tell that it looks big, but at the same time,
if you go
not.
up there, the window that, you know, looks like a normal sized window, and you think it looks smaller because you're standing on the ground. You get there, and it's really only half a foot big, and it's really just a way of tricking the eye. And they used a lot of methods like that in this film to kind of give it that grand scale, and it's really pretty amazing.
But because they did it that way, and because it had almost that like amusement park feel, when they brought in the CGI, it was seamless.
Yeah, it didn't look. It was, like I said, the CGI is like an aesthetic that it needs that type of context to it, that thematic context, because otherwise it would look silly. I mean, like I said, Avatar, they pulled that off with very realistic environments because the CGI itself was determined to be realistic.
Yeah.
Doing an orc from the Warcraft universe is because of the proportions. I'll admit, there were some scenes that may throw you off where the sizing and scaling doesn't seem quite right. There's a couple scenes where, not Thrall, my goodness, Duratan is holding baby Thrall.
Which, by the way,
hand.
For being a baby, Thrall had a lot of screen time. Just throwing that out there.
But he'd be holding Thrall, and he, you know, in one scene he'll fit in his hand, and then in a later scene it'll be like more or less the same shot setup, and it'll just take up a small portion of his hand, and it's just like their hands seem to like grow. It's they're hand fisted. It's kind of intense.
Yeah, the fact that their hands were bigger than their actual heads was bizarre.
There was a scene where an orc was carrying away a horse over his shoulder, and then another scene later on where they're riding horses.
Yeah.
Which was absolutely comical because there's this creature that's like 3 times the size of the horse itself riding a horse.
Yeah, which just wouldn't work.
No, and I feel bad for the horse. It seems terrible.
Yeah. Well, you can tell that even the horse was kind of like squished and weird CGI horse.
Yeah.
And not a real horse.
Oh, no, yeah, absolutely.
Or maybe the fact that it had a giant CGI monster on it made it look squished and weird. But yeah.
But, you know, magic, the way magic was filmed, speaking of Avatar The Last Airbender, that abomination, you know, that movie had absolutely horrid effects. This movie did magic correctly.
Yes.
I gotta say. You know, it was... They managed to portray it as not being overpowered. You know, everybody wasn't just flashing, waving their hands around, causing things to explode. Everything was nuanced and focused, and they made the wizards and seers and warlocks and everything seem much more grounded, much more, I guess things more fair.
Yeah.
You know, like if you were a foot soldier, you had a chance. Like it wasn't just an outright slaughter because mages were, you know, frost noving and then casting blizzard and killing 300 people in an instant. But magic was very well done.
On the same hand, though, the fact that the humans had guns in this movie, where they didn't have guns in the first Warcraft,
Or the second,
yeah. No, there weren't any guns. The orcs were slaughtering
Yeah,
the humans.
it was very unfair.
But the second you bring guns in the mix,
it was definitely, the guns were definitely the equalizer. I was kind of hoping that some of the other races, like when I saw the dwarfs present Lothar with the gun, I got excited. I started squealing. I was hoping for dwarf mountaineers to, do the whole ranger deal with the blunderbusses and dwarf mortar squads and things like that. I was a little bit disappointed there. It was a very human-centric story. I can understand that because the CGI required to do those other races must have been absolutely immense. So there's no gnomes. Dwarfs were in several shots, though. There was elves in several shots. I love the elves.
They were supposed to be night elves.
They were supposed to be night elves?
Yep, they're supposed to be night elves.
Okay.
I found a World of Warcraft behind the scenes making of the movie book at Barnes & Noble, and they were labeled as night elves.
Yeah, that's sort of silly because at that time in history, I'm a history lore buff, and it would have been high elves in that instance. They didn't meet the night elves until Warcraft 3.
Yeah, shout out to Noble on YouTube, who helped educate me on my Warcraft lore when I didn't want to sit there and read all my quests.
Yeah. I personally love reading the quest. I usually read them twice, and after that I just skip them. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. The other races were amazing. That the elves had some very fierce eyebrows.
Oh.
They were attack eyebrows. They were crosser than the rest of their face.
They seceded and made their own state of eyebrows.
Yeah, for
if anybody gets that
the reference.
joke.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I gotta say the effects, practical and CGI, definitely an A+.
Yeah, we're such dorks. Sorry, I cracked myself up with that one joke.
So then we get the story of the film, and the story takes place over the events of Warcraft, Orcs and Humans, the first in the series actually. So it's going back to, I want to say mid to late 80s. I actually don't have the year pulled up right now, but
I think it was 1995 that game came out. It was the year I was born.
Orcs and Humans?
I think so. I think that came out the year I was born.
You may be correct about that. I don't quite remember it because I would have been born the year before. We were some youngins.
Yeah, I was gonna say you couldn't. I don't mind saying that on the internet because it doesn't show how old I am. It shows how much. No, it was released the year you were born.
Oh, look at that, 1994.
I wasn't even born yet.
So I mean, this is a game. It's not World of Warcraft. It takes place in the game series, I believe. Probably by now, at the point that they're in the expansions, I think like 40 or 50 years before the events that we're at in World of Warcraft currently. So a lot of the characters you may not recognize unless you played the original RTS.
Or if you know the lore.
There's some references and stuff to the current game, and of course a lot of it's covered in books. But pretty much the gist of it is Medivh, under possession of Sargeras, opens a portal from Draenor to Azeroth and lets the Orcish hordes invade and start sacking the human civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, the movie sets its premise very well.
Mm-hmm.
It covers it very well. It covers Medivh being possessed and everything. It's great. Khadgar is, like I said, trained to be his replacement, and there's a little bit of conflict going on there of him trying to stop it. And Lothar is the champion and commander of the Alliance forces. King Lane is the human king. And pretty much everything that happened in the movie more or less happened in the game. They covered the first game very, very well. I can't really think of too many, points besides being nitpicky, like I said, about like the love interest, the romance plot. That was incorrect. Gul'dan's wasn't such a prominent figure in Warcraft 1. It was more so the actual Orcish warriors and everything. Warlocks weren't such a big deal. I mean, really, without being nitpicky, I couldn't find too many problems with it.
Yeah, and even the different story, the fact that the love interest, the fact that Gul'dan became a bigger character, the fact that Baby Thrall was everywhere, I think that's okay. Because it still gives you the incentive to go back and learn the real story. It's like the difference between a book and a movie. People throw hissy fits every time that the book's not the same as the movie. Like tonight, the night that we're filming this is actually the season finale of Game of Thrones, the 6th season, I believe. And there are differences between the books and the show, and that's okay, because watching the show, you shouldn't be able to
get a complete synopsis.
Yeah, exactly. Even with watching the show, you should still have an incentive to go back and read the books. just like with this, you can watch the movie and enjoy the movie for what it is, and then go back and learn the story, play Warcraft, Orcs and Humans, or just jump straight into World of Warcraft. In fact, if you went and saw it at a Regal theater, like we did, you got a free copy of World of Warcraft. They want you to go back and play the game. They want you to experience the story. They're just presenting it in a 2-hour format for you to consume as a movie. And I think that's okay if the story's a little different.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It's like I said, I don't find any problems with it, and it's very enjoyable as they're in mediums.
Yes.
You know, they don't really conflict with each other to the point where it's strenuous, or you can't follow one without completely losing the other. They each have small differences. It's like very much like she said, reading the book, or in a lot of cases for a lot of you maybe watching, reading like a manga or anime. There's untold volumes of content that won't be in the TV show.
Yeah.
Or vice versa, and that's perfectly fine. There's filler, there's things that have to be tweaked for a TV or film audience, and that's okay. Overall, story that they covered, what would you rate it?
I'd say 8.
I'd probably give it a 9. I'm a little bit of a purist, but even so, they got enough of it right. I think they deserve a 9 out of 10. Like I said, the one point I'd take away, just because the romance plot felt a little bit forced and just odd to begin with. Lothar was kind of portrayed as being like a very family man, and to see like the loss of his son setting him on this instant boner quest for Garona was kind of just an odd toss-in to me.
What, you don't want to have sex every time a family member dies?
Not particularly. But yeah, Game of Thrones really gets me going. Red Wedding, I was like, hoo-ah.
Ooh.
But no, I mean, that was probably my nitpicking point.
Actually, I remember we were in the theater, and he was talking about the fact that he had just lost his son to Corona. And I was just like, that's okay, Lothar, she's going to give you another baby.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, that's how they set it up.
Hopefully not mid-on. Hopefully we don't ever see him in the films. We try and forget he ever happened. But, I mean, I think they could have very well done a Arthas Lich King story as their first film.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been very well received, and it would have had the Ashbringer, and it would have been awesome. But I think to do that and then go back and done the prequels may have been a good idea. But at the same time, I'm not a big fan of prequels because you know what happens, and it does kind of lose that incentive. If you're not familiar with the story, you don't have that incentive to go back and watch the prequels as much. Star Wars, we knew that Anakin is going to become Darth Vader.
Yeah,
so
it's just, at that point it becomes a matter of time.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, some people are going to go see it just for the journey and to see it and how it plays out. But there's plenty of people that are like, well, I already know how it ends, why do I bother? Plenty of people who haven't seen the Titanic because they know the boat sinks and everybody dies. Not everybody, but yes.
I haven't seen Titanic, and I really don't care to.
We know what happens. We know how it ends.
Yeah.
But overall, the story was absolutely amazing.
Yes, I agree. I think the only reason I give it an 8 is that I can see, from an outsider perspective, how it's hard. Don't hit me with that thing now. How it might be a hard story to initially jump into. You were saying that there was a whole companion book that came with it. A movie shouldn't need a book to explain it. I'm just saying that right now.
Yeah.
A movie should be able to exist as its own media. And just certain little things, the Draenei, the fact that the Draenei, they were shown, but they never even said the name of what they were. The Night Elves, again, shown, never even mentioned what they were. Trolls, I understand that movies have to be a certain length. I definitely understand that, but there's a certain, you can have a little bit of introduction, and I think that's the problem. You were telling me there's about 40 minutes of movie that got cut out. I don't think they needed to cut out the full 40 minutes. The movie was so action-packed. Yes, it was 2 hours long, but it didn't feel 2 hours long. I could have sat there for another 20 minutes if that 20 minutes acted as a little bit of exposition for the movie. Now, of course, I know the story, so I don't need you to sit there and explain it to me. And most fans don't need you to sit there and explain it to us. But I think the reason that Warcraft, all of the media outlets were saying that the movie absolutely bombed, it's because everybody enters it thinking that they're not going to understand it. And maybe people shouldn't make assumptions about movies all the time, because that could be it. Also, it was having to compete with Captain America still, which has been out for like a freaking month and a half and doesn't need to be out. Also, opening weekend, we went to a theater. It had 4 showings. Are you kidding me? Opening weekend?
2 in regular edition and 2 in 3D.
For an opening movie weekend, that's ridiculous. I don't think Warcraft is. I think the summer was a bad time for it. I think it was competing with a lot of other
I
movies.
just think it was promoted absolutely awfully as far as commercials and radio spots. I mean, inside the theater, the entire staff was wearing Warcraft themed shirts, and they had Warcraft themed like slushy and cups and everything. I mean, it was like, where was all this before the movie hit? In China, you saw lots of promotional events, lots of mall visits, and all those crazy things, and it just wasn't here in the States. And I think that's why they had a lackluster response here.
Yeah, but I think there's also like I was saying, that level of assuming that we won't ever get it, and I could just see that for somebody who isn't involved in the lore is gonna sit there and think, I don't know what's going on. Which might not be giving people enough credit, but I could just see a movie critic sitting there and thinking, I don't know what's going on. I'm not gonna go look into this because I shouldn't have to. I'm gonna write about this movie and tell people not to go see it. And I think the Rotten Tomato reviews were atrocious. It got an awful score, though it was a great movie, because you had all these people who had no vested interest in the story writing about it.
They weren't fans. They haven't read the books. They haven't played the games. And I mean, I feel like this Warcraft movie got everything right to a lot of us because we're Warcraft fans.
Mm-hmm.
Because we understand a lot of the source material. If you're a critic and you're just going to watch it purely for cinematic merit, it was filmed beautifully.
Yeah.
Graphics were beautiful. The directing was excellent. The editing was fine. The pacing was fairly decent.
Yeah.
Like I said, I felt like there could have been a little bit more exposition in some parts, and a little bit less, War Council talking back and forth with others. But it's a film establishing what we hope to be a series, and so there needs to be that initial character development too.
Question: do you think if it didn't have the Warcraft title, it would have done better?
I don't think so. I don't think that it really holds a stigma. I think some people were worried about that, definitely. But I think anybody who's a Warcraft fan went to go see it because it's Warcraft.
Yeah.
People who weren't Warcraft fans, I think, would go see it because it was a fantasy summer blockbuster.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it really detracted anything. I feel like maybe some people who maybe just heard about Warcraft and have seen Arthas in a trailer or something as the Lich King, I think they were kind of thrown off because there's a disconnect there because the source material is so old. But I don't think it really hurt them.
Yeah. Hey guys, so this was part 1 of our Warcraft movie review. As you can see, Joa with his giant Ashbringer. When we were recording this, we did it all in one take, and we realized that it got to be really long. And we know that you might not want to sit through an hour of us talking about this movie. So we're breaking it up. The first part is going to be our cast, CGI, everything that we liked. And then the second part of the video is going to be story, directing, and speculations about the future of Warcraft movies. So be sure to check it out. We're going to have, as you're watching part 1, we're going to have part 2 uploaded in about a day. So come back and see that. You can find the link in the description once it is up down below. And thanks for watching, guys. Remember, we upload every week, multiple uploads every week. We upload usually about every other day, but with this, we're going to make sure to get part 1 and part 2 out very quickly. So thanks for stopping by.
Later.